Hi, I'm Wes the Explosion, and this is the 12th episode of the Backlog. An early milestone, but still a milestone. I played through Kirby's Adventure this week so that I could post it over on Victory Tricksters. If you're interested, link should be in the description, so feel free to come along for the ride over there. For the gist of what I think of the game, though, I think it's pretty dope. I believe that this is the second Kirby game and the first to use the copy ability, so this is where the staples got its start. Some of the other games incorporate different mechanics that only stay around for one title, so this makes this one of the most basic Kirby experiences, and one of the most solid since you don't have to learn something new that you'll never use again. Now, this is a Nintendo game, so there are some issues just due to hardware. The main one that's common to many NES games is the major slowdown when there are too many objects on screen. Some of the inputs are a little rougher than I remembered as well, like how there's some delay when you want to go from flying to attacking, which can make some fights harder than I expected. This also made the final boss especially tricky. All that said, this game is still really good, so if you have access to it, I recommend giving it a run through. I know that Nintendo Switch Online has it available on its NES library. Then, for my list, I was going to play Warriors, Legends of Troy for the PS3, but the copy I got off eBay sometime back would not play. From now on, I really need to buy only games that I have the time to play so that I can get around to testing them out right away. I did order a replacement, so I'll try to get back to that within a week of receiving it, but for the time being, I decided to play Ico for the PS3. Why I decided to go from a fast-paced hack and slash to a slower, more methodical game is beyond me, but I probably should have just stuck with what I was in the mood for. With that ominous note, let's get to the setting. I played as Ico, a boy who was taken to a castle/fortress and locked away in a sarcophagus-like thing. The people locking him away said that it was for the sake of his village because of his horns. Did I mention he has horns? Anyway, after they leave, he manages to shake his prison free, and then he breaks out when it falls and breaks. After wandering around a bit, he finds a girl trapped in a hanging cage and manages to free her. The two of them travel together to try and escape the castle, which, the task is daunting, so who would want to go it alone, right? Now, if you're familiar with this game, or can just put two and two together, know that this means that the primary type of gameplay in this is an escort mission. This is typically one of the most despised gameplay styles, so that makes it a bit strange that they based an entire game around it, but it does provide a unique experience. Ico can lead around or call the girl Yorda, as well as interact with certain objects such as switches or chains. He is also in charge of combat, which we'll talk about later, and is responsible for solving puzzles. Yorda can open certain doors, which is important. Ico couldn't advance without that, but it does make the partnership seem a little unbalanced. Ico can get around fairly well, oftentimes being able to get to where he needs to go without too much trouble. The main focus of the puzzle elements is figuring out how to get Yorda there as well. Along the way, the shadow monsters will pop out of shadowy holes and try to drag Yorda back into the shadows. This happens at either certain parts of the game or when you leave her unattended too long in another room. To deal with them, Ico needs to beat them with a stick, in perhaps the most boring combat I think I've ever played. You just kind of run at them while bashing a button to swing the stick back and forth, and if they aren't interested in engaging with you directly, they can run around faster than you can move, so they'll just dodge you, and you'll need to outmaneuver them. And all the while, you'll be flailing like a frickin' idiot. You can get better weapons later on, which cuts down on the number of times you need to hit them, which does improve the experience, but it's still not super fun. I get why they had to do this, because that makes it so that you have to manage your concentration and prioritize between battle, watching Yorda, and advancing forward. I just wish they would have made it a little more enjoyable. Anyway, if the creatures carry Yorda back to their hole, they'll start dragging her down into it. You'll be alerted when this happens. The camera will focus on where this action is happening, and you'll have like a small window to run over and just pull her out. If you fail, there'll be like a shockwave, which will petrify you, and it'll end the game. One aspect worth noting is if you get Yorda to one of the doors that only she can open, activating it will instantly wipe out any of the shadow creatures in the room. Now for how the game plays. As previously established, you go around solving puzzles to help Aiko and Yorda advance. Most of them involve interacting with the environment in some way, like climbing up walls, chains, and ladders, pulling switches, lighting torches, moving blocks, cutting ropes, etc. This is where some frustration can happen. Like, the controls are a little imprecise. The jump button is also the same as the ledge climb button, so if I accidentally pressed it one too many times because I really, really wanted the input to take, I could wind up doing the wrong action afterwards instead. There are a lot of times when I wouldn't move the way I swear I was pressing, and it can also be kinda hard to tell how they want you to interact with certain things, at least early on. One of the first levers I came to was hanging from a wall. First I pressed the interact button, which did nothing. Then I tried jumping, thinking that maybe I could grab onto it and pull it down with my weight, which also didn't work. Then I looked for a block to drag over and stand on, but there was none of those either. I finally figured out that I needed to stand at a specific distance right underneath the lever and press the interact button. And I'm talking the difference of like one step to the left here. This is a little troublesome early on, but once you learn the exact distance they want you to be, it becomes a bit more manageable. The other problem is that while the environment is very striking and stylish, it can also be a bit samey. Things can also be a bit dark, so combined with everything looking similar, it can be a bit tricky to pick out specifically what they want you to interact with. I got through the first chapter of the game without needing any help, then got stuck and opened up a walkthrough, which I kept up just in case I needed it again. Then by chapter 3, I was just following along with the guide because of the issue I had with the game. To save the game, you need to find a couch and have both characters sit down. This makes sense because if you saved after losing Yorda, you could very easily make the game uncompletable. There are also a few quick save locations, but you won't know you reached them unless you mess up and it restarts you there instead of a couch. Now, herein lies the problem. When you fail, and you likely will, several times, you go back to the save and have to redo your progress. Sometimes this will only be like a minute's difference, but many times the result will be 5, maybe even 10 minutes of progress that you now have to do all over again. Games like Cuphead can get away with it because it's fast-paced and it's an action game, but here that means repeating puzzles and traversal, which, I mean, after you've done it once, this just becomes tedious and boring. The reason I kept up the walkthrough after a point was to avoid having to do pointless repetition. More quick saves and the option to instead choose to like restart a section from a certain point would have made this a bit more bearable. One last gameplay element worth discussing is Yorda herself. I remember one game I played in the past where like I had to find other characters and then lead them around to have them help me clear puzzles. At one point I figured out the solution, but due to some bad luck with the AI, it just wouldn't activate. I was really irritated when I ended up looking up a solution and saw them do just the exact same thing I did, only it magically worked for them. This isn't a problem with Yorda. I had a lot of apprehension going into this, thinking she would get stuck on corners or the AI just wouldn't figure out what I needed them to interact with, but that was never the case. Like, on the contrary, she would find her way through obstacles at times that I thought I needed to, clear a path for her around. In fact, sometimes it seemed like it was easier to maneuver her than it was Aiko, and I didn't even have direct control over her. Kind of a backhanded compliment, I guess. My only complaint with guiding her is that she can be pretty slow, and there was a fair bit of times where I just kind of had to wait for her to, scale a ladder or find her way to where I was. Overall, I'm glad I experienced the game because it is considered a classic, but I think I would have enjoyed it more watching a Let's Play. It might just be my ADHD, or maybe work just saps all my patience, but the slow pace of the game and all the times I needed to retry something was more than I really wanted to sit through. That said, the story and environment are charming, and the gameplay is a unique experience, so I think someone who likes a more relaxed time and is fine with a more methodical playstyle will really enjoy it. The last game I played was the Heiress, which is a hentai RPG maker game on Steam. This one is a lot less consensual than the other H game that I played, so we're gonna blast through this really quick. I got through it without anything too terrible happening to the main character, only a bit of harassment here and there. Still not great, but definitely better than the alternative. The English translation is pretty rough, and even on normal as opposed to easy, the game is still really easy, and it doesn't take long to beat. I think originally I had it projected at taking 10 hours, and I beat it in just under 4, as you can see from my playtime there. There are apparently 8 endings, but given some of the crap that I would probably have to sit through to get them, I don't think I'll ever go back to explore the rest. You can easily skip this game, and just getting through it once, even while avoiding all the nasty stuff I could, makes me feel a little skeevy, and I normally have a pretty high tolerance for just the naughty bits, the dirty crap. Also watched one anime this week. It was from a few years back. I watched it subtitled, and then I was able to find it really cheap on Blu-ray. So, picked it up and just got through it for the English dub. It was School Live. It's about 4 high school girls who live at school. That is what their club does. They live at school, and there's nothing else to say about it. That's all it is. There's nothing weird going on here. And yeah, I enjoyed it, and if you can find a place to watch it, I'd say watch the first episode, and then decide at the end of the first episode whether you want to still be watching it or not, but make sure you get to those end credits. And thus another week comes to an end, with 2 games knocked off the list, bringing us to 129. Hey, just below 130. I still have a few days off before I have to go back to work, so I should be able to get done some stuff, or at least get started for some stuff for next week, so look forward to that. For right now, though, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, maybe consider subscribing, and if I'm real lucky, we'll see each other again next week. Ciao.